To describe George Harrison in one word would be impossible. He is genuine, generous, caring, and basically one of the best artists of his time. George Harrison was born on February 25, 1943, in Liverpool, England, to a family of one girl and two boys. He was the baby of the family. George was very smart as a child. Sometimes even before the age of 3, George would regularly run errands for his mom. As a kid, George was very energetic, creative, and imaginative. He would always be playing in the street with his friends, helping his neighbors, or even studying. He loved school and would get good grades until slowly he became lazy and just gave up. Near the end of his school career, his grades were so low that he couldn't even qualify to take the preliminary exam. He was only 12 years old. George quit school. He would walk around Liverpool to try and find interesting things. One day, he found something great, his first guitar. At only £9, he found it to be the best money he'd ever spent. From that day on, he would sit for hours on end, playing his guitar and discovering new and quirky chords. He had found his true calling. Before he had quit school, George had met a fellow student named Paul McCartney, and they had become good friends. After finding out about George's guitar playing, Paul suggested that they go watch a local band fronted by John Lennon, a fellow older student. After the performance, Paul and George talked to John and asked him if they could join the band. Once he noticed that George's guitar influences favored American rock and roll, he didn't think twice about letting them join the band. George was 15 years old. The band went through several changes until finally the band was composed of George, Paul, John, and the drummer Pete Best. The band also went through several names, including the Quarrymen, until finally deciding on the Beatles. The Beatles' big first gig was Far From Home in Hamburg's Star Club. Only used to playing 1-hour sets in Liverpool, it came as a great surprise to the Beatles when they found out that in Hamburg they would be required to play 6 to 8 hour sets every night, with very little time off. Even though it was very tough work, it made the Beatles ready for whatever was coming their way. When they got back to Liverpool in 1960, they played their first post-Hamburg show at the Cavern Club, and soon they became regular favorites. In no time, the Beatles were top dogs not only at the Cavern Club, but the UK. Beatles fans from all over England were coming to watch them perform. After their Cavern Club reign, the Beatles returned to Hamburg 2 more times. After the Beatles' big breakthrough, Parlophone Records offered the Beatles a recording contract. However, they would have to kick Pete, the drummer, out of the band. Quickly, they found his replacement, Ringo Starr. Soon after recording their first record, Please Please Me, it landed on the Billboard Top 20. The Beatles were now a worldwide hit, and Beatlemania was in full bloom. The Beatles filmed their first movie, A Hard Day's Night, in 1964. George completely despised it. However, he did get something out of it. He met his first wife, Pattie Boyd, on the first day of filming. Even though he was reluctant to show it at first, George fell in love with Pattie and got married several months later. The Beatles' fame was starting to take a toll on George. He would occasionally suffer depression when at performances he felt that the Beatles couldn't be heard and that their musicianship was worthless to the fans. During a visit to India, George discovered 2 more elements that would be integrated into his life: the sitar and Hinduism. The haunting sound of the sitar fascinated George, and he wanted to know more about it. After learning how to play it, he featured it on the Beatles' song Norwegian Wood. George also looked deeply into Hinduism and decided to convert. The Beatles' last tour performance was on August 29, 1966, and it was probably the best day of George's life. George was now more trusting to new experiences and more eager to discover the world. This led to his discovery of strong psychedelic drugs like LSD and marijuana. All of these substances heavily influenced the albums Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Yellow Submarine. In 1969, the Beatles recorded their last album, Let It Be. During the recording sessions, George would get very frustrated with Paul. Internal fights in the band eventually led to the band's breakup. George was now free and relaxed. Months after the Beatles broke up, Eric Clapton, George's best friend, met Pattie, George's wife. Eric claimed that he fell in love with her as soon as he saw her. However, he didn't want to betray his best friend. At first, George was mad, But seeing as Patty's and his relationship was failing anyway, he let it happen.